Hey everybody, how you doing? Are you ready to play a game? Okay, the name of the game here is Find 1st Division Lieutenant Chojiro Tadaoki Sasakibe. Sorta like Where's Waldo, except with Chojiro Tadaoki Sasakibe. You got 3 seconds, okay? You ready to play? Alright, let's do this. 1 Shinigami, 2 Shinigami, 3 Shinigami. Alright, did you find him? Alright, well, he is here. He is right in between Nanao and Isane. Kind of with his back turned to the foreground, kind of just like looking, over his shoulder like, I exist. I'm not like center stage in this, spread or anything, but I do exist. Damn straight, Chojiro, you do exist! That's why you get second billing in this Lieutenant series I'm doing. I had to lead with somebody a little bit more prominent than you. We led with Shuhei last time. Could have also done Izuru or Renji as number 2. But you know what? No, it's Chojiro. Chojiro Sasakibe. That's who we're leading with after Shuhei. Alright. Many of you might be thinking at this point this is going to be a relatively short video. To that I would say you do not watch a lot of my content. But also, I could literally just take a random Shinigami that appeared like once in the Soul Society arc. I could probably squeeze out at least a 15-20 minute video about that. But no, not about Chojiro. Because Chojiro, I love characters like this that don't get a lot of time to shine in the story for a very, very long time. And so we think that like, oh, okay, they're not very strong or they're just not important. Maybe their personality is just bland or boring or whatever. But then they have a chance to show up later in the story and just blow everybody away. Like, wow, that was crazy. That character that I slept on for so long did something so awesome. Now, we didn't exactly get that with Chojiro. That's the sad thing, is like I was building to something there. It's like, well, the only thing he really did for the vast majority of this series would kind of just get punched by Ichigo that one time. That was pretty much his highlight. Remember that? Ichigo shows up after training with Yoruichi and Zangetsu, and he's got his Bankai. He shows up with the really cool, like, cloak thing, and he's flying, and he saves Rukia from the Zenzai-Q. Not the Zenzai-Q, the Sokyo-Ku. The Zenzai-Q was the tower she was in. The Sokyo-Ku was the scaffolding with the giant bird and everything. So Ichigo saves her, and then, obviously all the other lieutenants are like coming after Ichigo. It's Morechio, the Squad 2 lieutenant, Chojiro Squad 1, and then Isane Squad 4, okay? And they all release their Zanpakutos at the same time. Isane's is run, Itegumo, and Morechio's is like smash 'em, Gegetsu Buri! Back when Gegetsu Buri's design was a little bit different. Gegetsu Buri's design back then, and we'll get into this when we get into Morechio's video, is it had like these giant metal spikes coming off of the ball. And later on, it's just like a regular ball and chain with just like more blunt edges to it, so that's something. And then last we have Chojiro Sasakibe, Squad 1 Lieutenant, directly under Yamamotto himself, and Chojiro's like, should I go after Ichigo? And Yamamoto's just kind of like, I give you the nod of stern approval. Yes, sir. And so he runs, he's all business. Morechio's kind of just like, get over here! And Isane's like, Isane, you kind of get the impression she doesn't like to fight. She's the lieutenant of the freaking medical division, right? And so, Unohana just kind of looks at her and is sort of like, yeah, okay, go ahead. You're the lieutenant, you gotta go, you gotta take him in. And, Chojiro is sort of like all duty, all like business. And he's like, well, we have an intruder, sir. What should I do? And Yamamoto's like, It's like, okay. And so he goes and he releases his Zanpakuto. It's, in the original, I think it's Pierce, and I think in the English dub, it's Bite. It's, Pierce, Gonon Rimaru, or the Stern Spirit, Gonon Rimaru. And so it turns his sword into a rapier, and, we don't really get to see what he can do with it, because Ichigo just kind of like, BAM! He punches out Morechio first. He punches Morechio right through Gegetsu Buri, and then while Chojiro was, like, a little distracted by that, like, oh man, he just punched right through that guy's Zanpakuto. BAM! And then he just gets slammed by Ichigo, and then Isane gets distracted, and Isane's like, he's not even using his Zanpakuto! Oh crap, I'm next, aren't I? BAM! And then she gets knocked down, and so Ichigo just floors 3 lieutenants right away. Now, I remember watching that scene, or I think I read it in the manga first before I saw it, on Toonami or whatever, and I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, Squad 2 lieutenant, Squad 4 lieutenant, I'm like, alright, those guys are probably just like regular lieutenants, right? But then I'm like, Chojiro Sasakibe is supposed to be the lieutenant of the 1st Division, under the Captain Commander. I thought he was going to be a little stronger than that. I thought he'd be a little bit tougher to resist, like, a punch. Even though Ichigo, I know he just trained, and obviously Chojiro probably wasn't thinking of him as like, oh man, this guy's going to be so damn strong, he's going to be taking us on, like, single-handedly, you know, without his Zanpakuto or whatever. I can understand that. Maybe Chojiro was taken a little bit off guard, but I'm like, I was expecting a little bit more from him, you know? Well, anyway, after that, he does pretty much nothing for the rest of the entire Arrancar arc. Hueco Fake Karakura doesn't really do anything there. He shows up at Fake Karakura. He's there, see? He's right there. You can see him. And actually, I remember this from the anime. When they all showed up at Fake Karakura, when all the GOTEI arrived, right? You got close-ups of all of them. You got a close-up of Yamamotto, close-up of Toshiro, close-up of Rangiku and everybody. And we also got a close-up of Chojiro. Like, man, yeah, all right, he's got a close-up. He showed up here. And also, keep in mind, this isn't even all of the GOTEI, right? Because a good chunk of the captains are away. You know, 3 of them defected over to Aizen's side. You know, Aizen himself, Tozen, and Gin. And so they haven't replaced those captains yet. And on top of that, Kenpachi, Mayuri, Unohana, and Byakuya are all in freaking Hueco. And so the remaining force, which is really less than half of their number, are showing up at Karakura Town to fight against Aizen and his whole Arrancar army with the Espada and everything, right? So you got to assume, like, man, they got to bring the big guns to this. They got to bring every available soldier, you know, every captain and every lieutenant that can still fight, right? And so Nanao really doesn't do much of anything. I don't think Nanao even goes. Maybe Nanao stayed behind in the Soul Society to run all the operations while they were away, because I don't think Nanao even shows up during the Fake Karakura Town arc. But Chojiro shows up. He's there in the group shot, and I'm thinking, okay, here we go, right? And he just kind of disappears. Like, seriously, like, it really is, like, he's there for the group shot, like, he's like, alright, we took the picture? Okay, well, I gotta get going, guys, you know, the family needs me, I ordered a pizza for, like, 6 o'clock, you know, I was like, we know you can't stay long, Chojiro, but it means a lot that you showed up for the group picture. I'm like, yeah, cool, we'll put it in the Soul Society, you know, yearbook or whatever. Okay, I gotta get going, guys. Alright, Chojiro, drive safe, buddy. Alright. You know, he just leaves. Later on, he pops in when the Vizards arrive. The Vizards arrive. Remember, there's this giant barrier that Urahara, you know, made, you know, surrounding all of Karakura Town, and like the 12th Division also helped out making, right? And so there's this barrier to kind of divide fake Karakura Town from the rest of the living world, right? So the damage isn't like, you know, burst outward, you know? And so when the Vizards arrive, they can't get in. So Chojiro, I guess, was the person, like, monitoring the barrier. And so, you know, Shinji's like, you know, if we didn't find this guy outside, we would have been wandering around the barrier for hours trying to get in. And Chojiro's like, sorry, Captain Commander, but shit looked pretty rough inside, and I guess I could have come and helped, but I decided to let in these bunch of, like, random defectors from the Soul Society from 100 years ago. And Yamamoto's like, it's okay, Chojiro, it's cool. And that's it. That's it. You think, like, at that point, when a good chunk of, like, the captains and the lieutenants were beaten down by the Arrancars, the Espada, you had, like, Ion took out a few, you know, it's just like, hey, Chojiro, you know, I understand you were guarding the barrier and everything, but maybe now is the time for you to maybe, like, pinch hit for somebody? Like, oh no, freaking Izuru's down. You want to, like, you know, fight, you know, somebody in Izuru's place or Shuhei's place or something? No? Okay. And so he just leaves again, and I guess is like, alright, well, I'm gonna go back to monitoring the barrier. It's just, you know, it's a little annoying, and at some point you gotta wonder, like, what could he have done, like, when Aizen was all going into his god mode or anything. Oh my god, that is crazy, because when you think about it, there's a point here where pretty much everybody is down. There's a point where Yamamoto fights, and he, you know, has to jump on his own, you know, sealed Zanpakuto with Wonderweiss to block the hit, so Yamamoto goes down, Soifone, Kyoraku, Toshiro, all the lieutenants are down, really. Rangiku barely manages to get back up to go to the Soul Society to see Gin. I remember that. You know, it's like at a point where everybody's kind of down, and Chojiro is like, what? Is he just, like, outside the barrier? Like, the Vizards go down too, and, like, is Chojiro just outside the barrier? Like, man, I hope they can manage to recover from this. Oh man, the Captain Commander's down, huh? Well, gotta protect this barrier, you know? And I mean, you know what? That's not... I shouldn't say that like it's condescending or anything, because if the barrier does fall, like, all of the living world could be destroyed by Aizen, but Aizen's not interested in that. He's interested in going to the Soul Society and making the Oken, right? And so he did that anyway. So it's like, whatever. You think that Chojiro at some point would have popped in? Maybe after Aizen would have left. Like, okay, Aizen left. Gin's gone. Tozen's dead at this point. All we really have left is Ichigo and Urahara's there. Yoruichi might have been taken out at this point. Isshin arrives, you know, and then Isshin and Ichigo have to go into the Soul Society to follow them. You think at that point maybe Chojiro would have showed up and been like, okay, well, I guess I could help you, but it didn't happen. Now, we later find out, and he doesn't do anything throughout Fullbring or anything like that, but we do find out finally during the 1,000-Year Blood War arc what was up with this guy. Like, what was the story with Chojiro? Okay, how come he never really got involved in fights? What was up with him? Okay, so when the Stern Ritter arrived to initiate that, like, you know, the calling of war, you know, we're declaring war on the Soul Society, they have the masks on and everything. Driscoll Birchsea is with them, Stern Ritter O, the Overkill. He slaughters like 100 Shinigami just like around the gates, you know, so that's how they get in, and he just like leaves like basically a message that we're here to mean business and stuff. And so while Yamamotto is talking to like the main force that are declaring war, one of Driscoll's giant talisman spears just flies into the Captain Commander's office and just boom, and just pins Chojiro against the wall like, okay, I'm dead. And then he just collapses, and they're like, well, he was a lieutenant, but he's dead now. And so Chojiro, you know, before he dies, he's there bleeding out, and he's like, Captain Commander, they can steal our Bankai. And then he dies. I'm not, like, that's not like, well, they think he's dead, but he comes back, right? No. Okay, right, but that was just like an illusion or something. No. Okay, but, like, they're gonna do something more with him, right? Kinda. You know? So he's dead, straight up, and I have to remember reading this, and this was when I was reviewing Bleach at this point, and I was sitting there thinking, like, okay, Kubo, I see what you're doing. You're starting off this arc, and you think to yourself, man, I gotta start off this arc in a big way, like somebody's gotta die, like one of the captains or one of the lieutenants has to die at, like, the beginning of this arc to let them know, like, the Quincy's mean business, right? I mean business. Like, this arc is the last arc, you know, shit's getting real. But you can also tell that maybe Kubo was going down the list of all of the lieutenants, all of the officers, and thinking, like, all right, who can I kill that would be like, oh man, he's dead, but also, like, you know, it wouldn't be like a major character, and he picks Chojiro. And I was just like, I mean, I liked him. I liked the design. I wish that I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for him to have some kind of moment. And so when he died, I was just like, that was the safe option, Kubo. That was like, you're looking down the list and just like, okay, Chojiro, I can kill Chojiro. I'm like, well, yeah, no duh. You did nothing with him, really. You know, he never really had a serious fight. We never found out about his Zanpakuto. We never found out about his past. So, of course, yes, he is technically a lieutenant, but for a lot of people, I'm sure in the fandom, you're just like, oh, you killed Chojiro. I mean, that sucks for Chojiro. He never got a chance to really do anything, but you're not going to feel as much impact as, like, if literally anyone else on this page died. Maybe Tetsuzaimon, maybe Iba, because Iba didn't really get a lot of chances to do a lot of stuff either, but, you know, at least he had a little bit more of a relationship with, like Ikkaku. Like, there was that moment at Fei Karakura when Iba was, like, beating the crap out of Ikkaku for not using his full strength, for not using his Bankai. So even Iba had a little bit more going for him, and Chojiro just simply didn't. So that was, like, the safe option to, like, cap him off, right? After he dies, there's a funeral for him. Yamamotto looks very somber. Byakuya gives the eulogy, and Byakuya kind of goes down the list, and this is where we kind of find out everything, like, posthumously, how badass Chojiro was, except we just never got a chance to see it. He's like, Chojiro Tadaoki Sasakibe was the lieutenant of the 1st Division for over 100 years. He never left his post. Even when other captains defected, or they died, or they moved on, you know, he never took the position up himself. He always stayed as the right-hand man of Yamamotto. And it was also revealed in the records that he had mastered his Bankai before Uketake and Kyoraku even could. You know, so he had access to a Bankai this whole time, and we're like, what? And he's like, he could use Bankai, but in all of the recorded history of the Seirei, he never used his Bankai in a battle, ever. And he always strictly just adhered to being the right-hand man of Yamamotto, being his assistant, being his lieutenant, and he was dedicated himself to that craft. And he, Byakuya even mentions in the eulogy, he's like, he kind of says it in a nice way, but in the eulogy, he's kind of like, there was a lot of people that said he didn't do shit, like, he's like, there were many that said he didn't even do much. He was just a regular, seated officer. He wasn't even a lieutenant, really. But make no mistake, he was truly a great man, worthy of respect. He achieved Bankai. He was really, truly worthy of being a member of the GOTEI 13. And then they light the funeral pyre, and then they, he's cremated, right? Later on, when the Stern Ritter invade properly in the first invasion, Driscoll's fighting Shuhei, Yamamotto shows up, and then we reveal that Driscoll stole Chojiro's Bankai and uses it against Yamamotto. And in one chapter here, I believe it's chapter 504, I think it's called, like, Wrath as Lightning, is the one sole chapter where we find out all the stuff. It's like, that's Chojiro's chapter. Like, a good 15 chapters after he dies, we get, like, his chapter, his story. Alright? So when Chojiro was very young, he had just greatly admired Yamamotto. Back when Yamamotto was a younger man, this is like 1,000 years ago, and this is probably right around the time, maybe directly after, he fought against Yuha and everything, maybe a little bit after that, he had a lot of respect for Yamamotto. So he's like, I want to be your right arm. I want to compensate for all the things that you can't do. Sort of like the speech in Naruto that Dodoi had with A, the Raikage. Kind of something similar to that. I drew parallels there. And so Yamamoto's initially like, I don't want anybody, I don't want any sycophants, I don't want anybody hanging around me, just, or if you want to, you could join my school, right? And you can, like, I can instruct you, or you could become an instructor. And Chojiro's like, no, he was, like, dead set. He's like, no, I want to be your, your right arm. That's what I want to be. And so Yamamoto's like, okay, fine, whatever. And so Chojiro started to train in the art of his Bankai, and he finally awakened to it, his Bankai, and he's like, I got my Bankai, Yamamoto, I want to show it to you. And Yamamoto's like, all right, fine, show me your Bankai. And so the fight happened. Of course, we don't get to see the fight in the actual chapter, but the fight occurred, and the scar that... So Yamamoto already had a scar on his face, and his nickname was Eijisai Dono because of that scar. But the other scar that goes overlapping it, so Yamamoto had a scar, that was like an X shape, or like a cross shape on his forehead. That other line was caused by Chojiro's Bankai, right? And so his new nickname was Genryusai, not Eijisai. But Chojiro still kept calling him Eijisai Dono because it's like, I'm the one that caused that other scar that led to that other nickname, so I can't call you Genryusai because it was like by my hand, and I feel bad for that. And Yamamoto, he took the injury, but Chojiro still lost the fight, and he's like, your Bankai is like a petulant child's. And Chojiro's like, oh no, I agree, yeah, I'm gonna train with this Bankai, and I'm gonna refine it, and I'm gonna get it like perfect. And Yamamoto's like, okay. And then eventually Chojiro, Yamamoto requests that Chojiro become his lieutenant, and he stays at that position until he dies. So we get a little bit more about his past there. He's like a very respectful, he put Yamamoto up on sort of like a pedestal, and he refined his Bankai throughout the decades, over a century, just to kind of like, out of Yamamoto's words, you need to train your Bankai until it's like matured, and he's like, yes, I will do that, but never really uses it in combat. See, that's the one thing I gotta say about Chojiro. It's kind of like a thing where it's like, okay, you're supposed to be his right arm. You're supposed to be there to help him out. I guess the one definition of that you could look at it is like, I gotta do the things that you can't do. So while Yamamoto is like the figurehead of the GOTEI, and like I'm the captain commander, and I'm the one that's kind of like stern and in full power here, Chojiro, you handle what, like the secretarial duties? Like, granted, I don't see Yamamoto hanging out in his office, just like stamping forms and doing paperwork and stuff. I guess Chojiro did that, I suppose, but it's just like, when things get live, like, I don't know, when Aizen is leading a freaking charge into the damn, living world and attempting to slaughter the Soul King and make an Oken, and your captain commander is on the ground, bleeding out after he failed, I just feel like maybe then would be an appropriate time to show up with your Bankai, which you definitely have. Like, here's the question I have, okay? What scenario would have Chojiro liked to use his Bankai? Like, what scenario in Chojiro's head is like, okay, I've never used my Bankai in like 1,000 years to fight, but what is the right moment for me to use it? And I guess Aizen and the Espada, that wasn't the right time to use it. I guess he just didn't feel like that was the appropriate moment to use it. But when he fought against Driscoll, he used it. And the only reason I can think he used it there was because he was literally about to die. Because Driscoll stated, I slaughtered 100 Shinigami when he first arrived. So he slaughtered 100 Shinigami. They might have also been members of the First Division. And then Chojiro noticed, like, oh shit, all of our soldiers are dying, and I'm gonna die. So now is the moment, after 1,000 years, this is the moment that I'm gonna use my Bankai in battle. And keep in mind, I think he still used his Bankai to train, like, probably pretty often, but this is the first time he used it in an actual fight, alright? And so he's like, alright, I'm about to die, this Quincy is slaughtering all of our men, this is when I'm going to use it. Not like when the war was going on and Aizen was slaughtering all of the captains and lieutenants, and including my captain got taken down. That's not the right moment. I don't know, maybe also Chojiro, he saw Ichigo arrive and Urahara and Isshin, and he thought like, okay, maybe they can handle it. Maybe I have to be the one. Maybe Chojiro was the one, and I think we might have even seen this in the anime. Chojiro is the one that kind of like goes around and like picks up the people that are like defeated or make sure they're taken somewhere safe. Like maybe he picked up Yamamotto's body and took him somewhere safe so the battle didn't like, you know, hurt him even more. And maybe he picked up the rest. Maybe he did that, possibly. I don't think it was ever shown in the manga if he did do that. And maybe he's like, okay, you know, Ichigo's here, Isshin's here, Urahara's here, Yoruichi's here. They'll take care of it. You know what I mean? Like maybe he thought like even with my Bankai, I don't have a chance against him, but you feel like the message of the Gotei and the message of being a Shinigami is like, you know, you gotta fight, you know what I mean? Like, that's your duty, you know? It's just like, this is Aizen. This is a guy that's attempting to, like, destroy the world as you know it, like, kill the Soul King. Like, you fight him. Like, you gotta imagine, do you think, like, all of the captains and all of the lieutenants, when they were standing against Aizen, when they were going against him, do you think they are all sitting there like, oh yeah, we got this guy, we can beat him, definitely, 100%. No, I bet a lot of them were like, we're not sure if we can beat this guy, he's really freaking strong. Maybe the captains thought they might have had a better chance, but the lieutenants and stuff, or the visors, you know, I don't think, do you think Lisa Yamamoto, do you think she was sitting there like, yeah, we can take this guy 100%? No, I'm sure a lot of them thought like, we might die here, but we gotta try to take him down, right? I mean, that's the best we got, right? And so I guess maybe Chojiro had a different mindset at the time, and he's like, I gotta protect the barrier, I gotta save other people. But we see him pushed up against a wall, 1,000-year Blood War arc, and then he uses his Bankai, so that's just the thing, right? So let's talk about his Zanpakuto now, I guess. That's as good as time as any. Okay, so as I said, his Zanpakuto is Gonryomaru, or the Solomon Spirit, or the Stern Spirit, okay? And as I said, its release command is Pierce in the original, and then Bite in the English dub, and it turns into a rapier. And we don't get to see what he can do with it, but as we later find out, actually, we first found this out during the Zanpakuto filler. The Zanpakuto filler is kind of where we first got the idea that he has an electrical Zanpakuto, he has a lightning Zanpakuto, or something that controls lightning and thunder, right? And that is indeed accurate, okay? Because when he activates his Bankai, which is, I used to be able to remember this, I think it's like, Kokujo Riko Gonryo Riku or something like that. Let me go check to make sure I got that right. I probably didn't. Oh, Kokyo Gonryu Riku. Okay, it's Yellow Glittering Royal Villa of the Stern Spirit, okay? And so when he activates his Bankai, it's a lot more apparent that it is in fact a electricity or lightning-based one. I like to think that with the rapier, he could use that to channel electricity in like smaller amounts, maybe charge it up with like Electro from like One Piece and like attack the opponent with like this electrified sword, or like, you know, strike people like that. Like Pierce was the release command, so Pierce Gonryomaru, and it's like electric sword. He's like, haha, and he's like doing like a fencing style with his rapier, and it like fires off like lightning bolts. Maybe that was the ability in his Shikai. It's just that he was taken off guard by Ichigo, and all that training, I guess, didn't like, oh crap, I'm taken off guard, BAM, and he just gets knocked out. Okay, and so then with his Bankai Kokyo Gonryu Riku, it creates, it has an effect. Here's the thing. It has an effect very similar to Hyorin Maru, to Toshiro's Zanpakuto. It's even compared to Toshiro's, where Toshiro's, when he awakens Hyorin Maru, allows him to control the weather itself. Like, the weather warps and it starts to snow or hail, whatever, because it's a snow-based Zanpakuto, right? Well, Chojiro's Bankai is the same thing. He activates it, and then instead of, like, snow clouds, like, hail or, like, a blizzard, it's a lightning storm. So he literally creates, like, giant dark clouds of, like, lightning and thunder whenever he goes into his Bankai. So just the fact that it can manipulate the weather alone, that's a pretty badass Bankai, right? So he activates that, the weather shifts, and then this giant glowing, like, orb, like, blimp of electricity appears above him, and then one pillar shoots into the sky of, like, constant, like, electricity firing off, and I think there's, like, 9 additional ones that fire into the ground. And the aim of the ability, the way that we think that how he would use it, is in his Bankai, he would still have the rapier, and then he would just, like, guide the lightning strikes down, like, wherever he pointed his sword at, boom, 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 just like infinite lightning strikes. How many lightning strikes? All of the lightning strikes, yeah. That seems to be the basis for the ability, right? Like, there's a giant orb of just electrical power in the sky. The heavens have rankled and shifted themselves, and then he just commands the power of, like, all of the lightning in the sky as his blade. And he might have been able to do this way more adeptly than what we saw with Driscoll. In fact, we know that because Driscoll was using it to just fire off lightning strikes against Yamamotto, and after a few lightning strikes, Shuhei's like, "Captain Commander, no!" And Yamamoto's just sitting there just taking the hits, and he takes like a bunch, and he's just like, "Chojiro, your soul must be screaming in agony right now. The Bankai that you fostered for all those years was not this weak!" And Yamamoto just takes out his sword and just boom, just incinerates Driscoll right down to the bones, and then the bones even just get turned into ash and just dead, you know what I mean? And so we get the impression that when Chojiro used this Bankai, it was a little bit more elegant. It wasn't just like lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. Imagine Chojiro having this power and then having his sword, the rapier, and then like the lightning comes down from the sky and like wraps around the rapier and all of his entire body, and he's like dancing with the attack, like with the sword, like he's like swinging his sword and the lightning like bends in ways that like lightning doesn't even like operate, like he's warping the way the lightning path goes, and then he's just like attacking the enemy from all these different angles and stuff. Or he wraps the lightning around himself like a barrier or a shield, like a lightning armor or something like that. Or he charges all the lightning up in one giant attack and just brings down the sword in his final lightning strike of glory. Like I imagine after a century of freaking, not even more of a century, he kind of like mastered his Bankai before that, but it's like even before that he was like, tinkering with it, right? And so it's like for hundreds of years he was messing with this and like training with this and probably taking some advice from Yamamoto and stuff. Like this Bankai in its full capacity would have been probably beautiful to watch, just gorgeous, like lightning falling down and just attacking the enemy. And that makes me feel even like, really? Okay, and so we didn't get a chance to see that in action. So we never did. We never did. We never got to see this Bankai be utilized by Chojiro, the person that mastered it for all those years, right? It was just a flashback where we get an off-screen fight when he first achieved it. It wasn't mastered yet. And then Driscoll just using it in the most blunt way possible, like lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. Like, that was it, And so Yamamoto even mentioned, like, oh, your real Bankai was way stronger than this shit. This is one of those things, like, I'm telling you what, like, when the anime comes back, man, I am hoping so hard that they do more with Chojiro. They at least maybe show the fight between Chojiro and Driscoll. Like, at least showing Chojiro using his Bankai, and maybe everybody in the Seirete like, oh my god, the sky is turning dark, and just, like, watching his power, and we actually get, like, at least an episode of the new anime with him fully showing off his Bankai. Or, if we don't get that, can we at least get a little bit more of an extended flashback with Chojiro? Could we at least get a few more moments with Chojiro training with Yamamoto so we see the Bankai in full capacity there? Maybe a few shots of him training throughout the centuries and in the decades of him learning more about his Bankai. Could we get something like that? Maybe. Or, I mean, like, I doubt they would do this. Well, I don't know. I don't know how much control Kubo has over this. I don't know how exactly it's going to work, because I think they're definitely going to move some stuff around, right? I don't think that the way that the anime is going to be adapted is going to be a 1-to-1 ratio for the manga. I just don't think that's going to happen. So, I mean, it depends. Kubo might think to himself, you know what? I have another chance here. I might actually have another chance to spin this around. So maybe instead of Chojiro dying, maybe you could have somebody else die, like maybe a seated officer of the First Division or somebody else die. Chojiro survives, or maybe Chojiro does get defeated by Driscoll, and maybe Driscoll does steal his Bankai, but Chojiro is able to survive the attack. He's able to survive and heal, and then he fights against Driscoll, and then gets his Bankai back, and maybe he could die at some other point during the arc, but at least he, like, gets, like, he gets a chance. He gets a chance in the story to really show his stuff, right? And I don't know, maybe what Kubo was going for there at the end of the day was, like, that's not Chojiro's style. That's not, Chojiro is not the character that's in the forefront. He's in the background kind of supporting everybody. That's kind of his thing. So giving him a full-on fight, that's not really in his character. That's not really the message I want to get across here. But I still would really want to see his Bankai. I mean, come on, everybody does, right? Yeah, it'd be cool to see him use it in its full way, right? Something else about Chojiro is kind of like a caveat here, ending is about his personality. Really, it's like the only thing we get about his personality, because we don't really get to see him very often. We get to see him quite a few times, not even quite a few times, we get to see him like a handful of times during the post-credit sequence, like the Kone's Shinigami Cup Golden, you know, those kind of stuff, like the Omake segments. We see him there a few times, and really his personality comes down to two things. First thing is, he is kind of self-conscious about the fact that he's kind of so forgotten. You know, it's just like, nobody ever pays attention to me. Like, there's one where there's an Omake where they're all sitting around and drinking sake, like Shuhei and Renji and Izuru and Sasakibe, they're all there drinking. And, you know, Sasakibe is kind of talking to Renji, and he's like, you know what, Renji, I just feel like some people don't even notice when I'm around. And then Shuhei's drunk right next to him. He's like, hey, Chojiro, when'd you get here? And he's been sitting here like the entire time. And it's like, oh. So that was one thing. He's kind of self-conscious about that. So when Byakuya was reading off his eulogy, and he was like, you know, oh, some people say he didn't do much. It's like, maybe Chojiro was very self-conscious whenever he heard whispers like that. And the second thing we know about Chojiro, about his personality, is he was really a big fan of Western culture. Apparently what happened was, I guess, during the 1800s, during the Victorian era, Chojiro went on an expedition into the living world, into England, which I guess would be the territory of the Soul Society West Branch, and so I don't know if Wingbind was up and operating at that point or whatever, but apparently Chojiro went to the world of living during the Victorian era, and he was in England, and he saw, like, a bunch of British gentlemen hanging out, like, drinking tea, and he was just blown away by the whole, like, the culture shock and how everything was, like, different from the primarily, like, ancient, like, Edo period Japanese culture where he comes from, right? So he was like, oh my god, the manners and the outfits and drinking tea and, like, the clocks and the chandeliers and the opulence of, like, British royalty and stuff. Like, Chojiro just was, like, swept away by that kind of stuff. So he basically became like a British fanboy kind of. And so that's where he just, like, wants to, like, have, like, we have a scene in an Omake where he is defeated by Aizen in the Omake, where Aizen used Kyoka Suigetsu on him. And so he creates this perfect world where he goes in the living world, sees an antique shop, and he has, like, the perfect, like, black butler kind of style where he dresses up in the British outfits of the West, and he has, like, an immaculate kind of, like, British mansion, and he's like, oh, this is perfect, this is the life, this is my retirement, and then he's, like, defeated, and Aizen is like, so simple to defeat him. So I guess that's canon. That's canon. That's what happened. Chojiro tried to stop Aizen, but then Aizen just used Kyokai Suigetsu and trapped him into an illusion where he's living as a British noble, and that's, like, his perfect life. And in addition to that, there's also an Omake where Uryu tries to help out Chojiro because Renji brings Chojiro to Uryu and Ichigo, and he's like, okay, guys, listen up. Chojiro thinks that nobody really pays attention to him, and he kind of, like, blends into the background. So we got to make a new outfit for him that really pops, something that you see, really? It's like, look at this. look at his style. I mean, okay, you know, Shuhei's got the really badass, you know, cut off, and he's got the tattoos, he's got the scar on his face, he's got the 69 tattoo, right? Marechio's got the big purple thing. Like, you know, when you see Marechio when he's coming, right? You know that's Marechio. He's like, Renji's like, I got the red pineapple hair, you know, Rangiku's got the boobs, you know, everything like that. We need something to make Chojiro, like, pop as a character. Because right now, all he's really got is, like, the cloak. That's another thing, too. He wears this, like, cloak thing, and I originally assumed that was, like, a Captain Haori. You know, was I the only one that thought that? It's not as long as a Captain Haori. It's kind of like a sash, and it's taken, I think, from, like, the West. Something more Western than Eastern, right? Well, anyway, Uryu sees this conundrum, and he's like, oh, yeah, don't worry. I recognize that style. That was really popular in the West. And he's like, oh, yes, of course it was. So you'll help me. And he's like, yeah. And so Uryu makes Chojiro a British-themed superhero outfit. Like, I'm Captain Britain! And we see an Omek where he's, like, fighting Hollows as Captain Britain, and he's got the flag, he's got the Union Jack as his cape, and he's got, like, a mask on, he's like a British bowler hat and a tie, and he uses his Gonrimaru, he uses the rapier, and he goes into fights, and he's like, ha-ha! And so everyone's like, yeah, that's his new style! But nobody will still notice who he is because he's got a mask, he's covered up. But whatever, he's happy, and that's all that matters. Plus, he's got a cool mustache, right? And so that's the story of Chojiro. That's pretty much all we know about him in terms of personality. He's very self-conscious about not being noticed, and he really likes Western, like, British culture kind of thing. And that's it. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm hoping we get a lot more of Chojiro when we get to the 1,000-Year Blood War arc in the anime. Maybe doing the whole rewrite thing that I said is too lofty of an idea, but at least maybe show a little bit more with him fighting Driscoll and a little bit more of the flashback involving him and Yamamotto, add a little bit more weight to his character, before we just move on from him, completely forget about him, and then just move on to the rest of the story, because I'm pretty sure that happened. Yeah, like after, like that was like an initial phase of the arc where Chojiro dies and Yamamotto avenges him, and then after that it's just, okay, you're avenged, Chojiro, and then I don't think he's mentioned or referenced at any other point throughout, like, the entire arc, you know, and so that's it. There's the story arc at Chojiro. That's all you got. So yeah, but I'm glad I got to do this Lieutenant series and mention him today. Also about his Zanpakuto spirit. I wasn't really going to go too much into the spirits here, but his Zanpakuto spirit is Gonryomaru, takes the form of, like, a more Eastern design. So that's an interesting, like, parallel there. Like, maybe Chojiro, yes, he's a big fan of, like, Western culture, but he's still a Shinigami that comes from, like, the Edo period. Basically, that's what, like, that's where the Seirete is kind of designed off of. So that's an interesting little parallel there. And and also it's also interesting to note that Gonrimaru, the spirit, doesn't use the rapier to fight. Actually uses a pike, like a Japanese pike, like polearm weapon. So that was interesting. It's like different styles on how it goes, like an East and West kind of motive. There's definitely stuff there, you know, there's there for like an interesting character arc or something. It's just, it never really went there, unfortunately. I guess Kubo just maybe didn't have enough time, or he's like, okay, well, I could focus on Chojiro, or I could focus on Shuhei. I'm gonna focus on Shuhei. I could focus on Chojiro, I could focus on Rangiku. I gotta focus on Rangiku. It's just like, I'm sorry, Chojiro, you're just taking a back seat for this. But anyway, yeah. So that's that. Next Lieutenant video, what's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? Tell you what, I'm just gonna spin this poster around while looking over here, and I'll just point at somebody. And the next one's gonna be Shuhei. Already did him. Okay, let's try that again. We go with throwing dice or drawing cards. Now I'm just doing this. That is Cayenne Shiba's hip. Alright, so next time we're talking about Cayenne. Alright, cool. Cayenne's dead as well, but we get a lot more with him because he gets possessed by Arrancar later, or Arrancar possesses his corpse, and so we get a lot more with him. Alright, I wasn't going to think about doing Cayenne until later, but alright, fine. Third video, Cayenne Shiba, coming up next. Have a great one, everyone.